After posting this video, a lot of people seemed to be skeptical about this opening called the Mexican defense. So this is where we were trying to force d4 players to play the e4 opening lines. Now, I didn't say that things are always going to be moving your way. I was just trying to give you some ideas on how you can attempt to take a d4 player out of his preparation and make him play the e4 lines which he did not prepare for. Which is what this video series is all about. Forcing d4 players to play the e4 lines. For example, let me show you something. After white plays d4, most of your opponents expect you to hit back on the center with a move pawn to d5. In the d4 line, white is thinking of putting his e-pawn on e3 most of the times and his c-pawn on c4. E.g., from here white may play something like pawn to c4, the queen's gambit, and then maybe let's say you play knight to f6. In this position, white has many options, but the most common one is knight to c3, after which is going to play something like knight to f3, and then let's make a random move like bishop to e7. Here you will see white responding with a move pawn to e3. Now when you look at this position carefully, white's pawns are pointing towards this direction, which tells you to say in the queen's gambit or in the d4 lines, white mostly prepares for a queenside attacking system. White intends to start fighting from the queen side in an effort to make you do the same. And this is exactly what my d4 to e4 series are trying to solve, attempting to shift the game back to the king side by making white play the e4 lines. Yes, this will not always work in the opening stage, but we see super GMs like Fabiano Caruana trying to apply these ideas in the middle game and in the end game. For example, in my last video, I just showed you how Caruana played the Mexican defense with an intention of playing pawn to e5. If white didn't play knight to f3, am I saying this is the ultimate solution for all your d4 problems? Nope. Neither am I saying that if things don't go according to our plan, we will lose the game. Nope. The aim is just to try and make white play in our terms. We don't want to play what white wants. So without wasting much of your time, let's get started. So today we are looking at another popular opening or defense for black, which you can use against white's first move, pawn to d4. So the question is, how do we try to force white to play the e4 lines from here? Watch. So after d4, I suggest that you start with a move knight to f6, and then here most of the times you will see white responding with a move pawn to c4, just taking control over the center with his flank pawn. In the last video, I recommended the move knight to c6, which is the Mexican defense or the black knight's tango. But in this video, we are looking at a different move order, pawn to c5. And I guess a lot of you guys already know this opening, but I'm going to add a little twist to it. Not what you always play. So pawn to c5. Here, black threatens to exchange the c-pawn against a central pawn. So the objectively best solution for white is to advance the pawn to d5, gaining space in the center. In point of fact, Stockfish also confirms that white should go pawn to d5 in an effort to grab the center and to create, space for himself. Yeah, you will see white players do all sorts of things like knight to f3, knight to c3, pawn to e3, but those are just sidelines that you don't even have to worry about. I mean, if white decides to leave this pawn on d4 just like that, we still have an option of transposing this into a position which looks like a Sicilian defense. Look, after you take this pawn on d4, it means you are going to remain with two pawns on the center, and white will only remain with one pawn. So, well, if white doesn't do anything sensible with this pawn on d4, we will take it. Anyways, according to the Lichess Masters Database and the Lichess Database, the most popular move in this position, or the most common move in this position, is pawn to d5, which you will see most of your opponents playing. Now, this is called the Benoni defense. It can also transpose into the Benko gambit after black plays the move pawn to b5, for example. In this position, black can also play pawn to d6, pawn to g6, fianchetto his bishop and castle shot, and that's what I hate. which is why I recommend that immediately just go pawn to e5. Now wait a second, is this a dubious defense? Let the Lichess database speak for itself. According to the Lichess database, the percentage score of this defense in this same position is 47% for white and 47% for black currently. I mean at the time of this recording. And as you can see in this position, if black not winning most of the games, the game just leads to an equal game. The game is still equal. And let me tell you something about this move, pawn to e5. Pawn to e5 by black invites white to play pawn to e4 in the near future after he plays knight to c3. Yet again, we are back in the e4 lines and the game begins to shift its attention to the king side from the queen side. Now after we play pawn to e5, white has 3 different options that he can take, out of which only one seems to make sense. Yes, white can take with n%, d takes on e6, but I'm not going to waste your time discussing this move, because just by looking at the Lichess statistics, you can see that black wins most of the games after pawn takes on e6. 53% of the games are won by black. Because let's say if white takes on e6, we do not take with our d pawn, we take with our e pawn, renewing our strategy to go e5 again. So there is no good reason for white to take. Not to mention that white cannot play pawn to d6 in an effort to lock our bishop on f8. I mean, that would be more like one of the worst moves of all time. For example, if white carelessly plays pawn to d6, just say amen. Because it's now time to play queen b6 and there's nothing that white can do to protect this free pawn right here. There is no defense. So clearly speaking, pawn to d6 is out of the equation, which leaves white with only one sensible option, knight to c3, which you will see most of your opponents playing. In fact, this is the most played move in this position. Now after knight to c3, it is in this position where I recommend that you just close down the center with pawn to d6. Now look how beautifully arranged your pawns are on the center. This is a very beautiful lock. But again, I'm not saying this is the ultimate solution for all your problems. No. The Benoni, just like any other defense, has got its own limitations as well. For example, the pawn on d6 most of the times tends to be a weak pawn in the middle game and sometimes even in the end game. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. From here, go and check into the Lichess database or the chess.com database, whatever. You're going to find that the move pawn to e4 is what white plays in this position, and they are going to play it pawn to e4. The aim is just to grab the whole center and gain as much space as they can. Now just a little break. If you are looking for a serious opening repertoire to use in classical tournaments, I have 2 simple yet easy to understand courses which are very cheap on the market, I would say. One complete opening repertoire for white, which is the English opening, and another complete opening repertoire for black, which is the Caro-Kann defense. Feel free to check them out and contact me via the details provided in the description down below if you are interested. Anyways, back to the video. Now, I should have told you earlier that after pawn to e5, we are now playing the Czech Benoni defense. And it is in this position where most black players start messing up with the move orders. For example, both bishop e7 and pawn to g6 are okay. But honestly speaking, I hate the outcomes of these 2 moves. For example, pawn to g6, when you play pawn to g6, these dark squares will be very weak in the long run. And white always has this move in the middle game, which is pawn to f4, which is why in this position I do not play pawn to g6 or bishop e7. What I like doing is I like putting my queen's knight on the d7 square, and I'll show you the logic behind that. Watch. So in this position I recommend the move knight bd7. Now, are we not blocking the light squared bishop? Where do we even intend to put this knight? Simple, we are trying to put this knight onto the g6 square instead of putting the pawn on g6, and you're going to see how advantageous that is. So let's say after white plays bishop d3, the most popular move in this position, I recommend that to just play bishop e7, creating a small room for the queen's knight so that it can later on go to the g6 square. And in this position, believe you me, you won't see many advanced players going knight to f3. They go knight to e2 in an effort to prepare for the f2 pawn push. For example, knight g e2 is what they play most of the times. I recommend that you just relax and play knight f8 before you castle, because you want to put your knight on g6. Go into the Lichess database, you will find that castle short is the top played move, after which you should play knight to g6. Now hold on. In this position, you may check in both the Masters and the Lichess database. You will confirm with me that black wins over 50% of the games with this defense. Guys, I'm not drunk or crazy. What I'm showing you is very true. It is very real, and it happens in most games of advanced players. Look at the Lichess database here. Black wins over 50% of the games. And I'm not talking of lower rated players here. I'm talking of the 2200 level players up to 25 or whatever. These games are real and they do happen. You can see that I left out the options of the lower rated players so that I can give you much confidence to play this opening, since it happens against the 2200s, the 2500s. Anyways, let's move on. So in this position, after you play knight to g6, just be ready to see this move, pawn to f4, because that's what they play most of the times, and it is the most played move anyways, according to the Lichess database and also in the Lichess Masters database. Watch. Pawn to f4 by white is the top played move. Now, wait a second. Now, you guys, this is the key here. Whenever you see this pawn to f4 by white, it's high time you take it, okay? Pawn to f4 equals to e takes on f4. Again, pawn to f4 equals to e takes on f4. The moment you let white come to the f5 square, it's high time you pack your bag and go home, because you're going to have a very hard time defending on the king side. So I suggest that whenever you see pawn to f4, just take that pawn and life goes on. So e takes f4 is what I recommend you should play. Knight takes f4 is mostly played, and I'm only showing you the top moves. Now in this position, why do most black players lose? Here is why. Most unprepared black players like playing knight to g4 with an intention of coming back to e5, which is okay, but I think it's just not good enough. And then what I do not recommend is to take on f4, because by doing so, you are helping white to develop his idle bishop on c1 and also improving his position. An alternative move which you can try is knight on e5, because this will be more like a great outpost for this knight. But here is a little twist that I want you to add to your own repertoires. Knight d7 is what I recommend you should play. Here our plan is very simple. We just want to put this knight on the e5 square. This knight on g6 serves a big purpose of guarding the h4 square and also watching the f4 square. And we're going to be glad if the white takes our knight on g6, because we are going to take back with our h pawn, opening the way for the rook. Are we blocking our light squared bishop for good? Nope. Knight e5 is what we are planning to do, and by playing the knight back to d7, we are giving space for the f pawn to move. For example, if knight takes on g6, just say amen and take back with the h pawn. Now you know what? At the time of this lesson, according to the Lichess database, black has never lost any game in this position. Again, if you don't believe me, here is what I'm talking about. Now, I respect some opinions from certain individuals who like saying that most players on Lichess are weak players. But I was going to agree with that if at all the Lichess players are trained by Lichess, and if all of them come from the same amateur country in terms of chess. So please don't insult people based on which platform they use. You will find strong players even on Lichess, such as Magnus Carlsen, Dania, I Am Rosen, and even Hikaru does play on Lichess most of the times. So in my opinion, it is a good platform just like chess.com. Players are all the same. Now that is just a different topic which is not part of this video. Okay, so after h takes on g6, what you will see most of your opponents playing is bishop f4. I don't know why. Bishop f6 is what I recommend you should play in this position, because you are trying to sit on a beautiful outpost d4. And from here, we have started following a game between Kevin Ganado versus Rashdan Fadillo, which was played on Lichess. The black player was a 2392 rated chess player, which should give you more confidence to play this as well. So after bishop f6, white took on d6, which is a blunder, by the way, because of the next move, bishop d4 check, forcing the white's king to go to the h1. Now in this position, the plan by black is very simple. If this bishop wasn't on d6, black would have taken on h2 with check, and after king takes the only move, black was going to play the queen h4 checkmate, because the king cannot go back to the g1 square that is covered by the bishop, and if the queen comes to h4, the king cannot escape, which is why black in this position played knight e5, blocking the vision of this dark squared bishop. Now in this position, rook takes on h2 and king h4 is possible, which is why white took on e5, renewing the threat. And after bishop takes e5, you can now see how many attackers are pointing towards the king side. What did I tell you in the introduction of this video? When white plays d4 or the queen's gambit, he wants to make you start fighting from the queen side. So by playing pawn to e5, you now shift the game towards the king side. Queen to f3 was played by white. Rook takes on h2 with check anyways. Note that the king cannot take because there is a bishop here. That's why white played king g1. Queen h4, intending to go rook h1 next, which is checkmate. And that's why white played queen takes on f7 check out of desperation. Black played king d8, a computer move. Very good. Queen f8 check, king c7. Knight b5 check, a desperate move, king b8. Checkmate is now unavoidable because there is rook h1 coming and the f2 square is covered by the queen. With this defense, imagine black won in just 20 moves. How beautiful was that? Now in the next video, to prove my point, I'm going to challenge one of the higher rated chess players so that I can try to beat him in the same style, just to demonstrate how powerful this opening is. Therefore, thank you for watching my video. And I hope you learned a lot in this video tutorial. If you don't believe in this defense, well, that is fine. Not every defense is for everyone, but you can just give it a try and see how it works for you. So until next time, bye bye, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.